Hello, Rama Pupoda. Hope all are in good health, feeling great, wonderful, having a happy and peaceful life. Now let's continue with devotee Arthur Osborne. Self realization. Before it happened, Osborne had called me and handed over articles for 9 full issues of The Mountain Path to last up to July 1970. Perhaps knowing that he was to drop his body in May 1970, he edited all the 9 journals before he had his self realization. He was a jnani who fully accepted his karma. He had completed his karma and now was established in jnana. I used to be like a delighted child in the proximity of Osborne. My friends used to pull my leg. Do not carry it too far, this hero worship of Osborne. This did not matter to me because they did not know how I enjoyed his Brahmic state. I remembered what Osborne used to say. At last, life has a meaning and a purpose. It is tremendously exhilarating to realize the truth of the oneself. His words had come true in his life, and it was given to me to see that every word uttered by Bhagavan and by every one of these old devotees is absolutely true. Just before he dropped his body, Bhagavan told his attendants, Santosham, which means thank you. When Osborne was in Bangalore and his end was near, he could not speak at all. As a ritual farewell, Mrs. Osborne went around the prostrate body of her husband. Suddenly she heard Osborne's voice saying clearly, Thank you. Osborne's body was brought to Tiruvannamalai and interred in his house. I was there all the time and I was heartbroken. The July 1970 issue was the first issue that I brought out without Osborne. He would place every issue that was brought out in Bhagavan's shrine, and only then would he himself go through it or give it to me and the others. That was the first issue when Osborne was not there. When I placed it in front of Bhagavan's shrine, I was weeping. That day, Osborne appeared to me in my dream. He said, Ganesan, give me my journal. He then took this July 1970 issue, went through every page, and patted me in appreciation. That was the closeness with which Osborne and I worked together. Osborne lived the Master's teaching and attained the ultimate truth of Atma Sach Shankar. His very first words to me when I returned to the ashram in 1960 were ask, but ask only for self realization, and that will retain you in the Arunachala. Arunachala is not only physical but also in the heart. He wrote, It is tremendously exhilarating to learn for the first time the truth of the oneself and the possibility of self realization. At last, life has a meaning and a purpose. It is not a question of whether there is a God apart from you, but whether there is a you apart from God. We ask, Who am I? But is there one? First, we presume that there is an I, and then we ask who or what it is. There just is, not I, he, it, or anything, but just is. We try to divide up this simple is by pronouns I, he, you, and by this and that, but is it really divisible?
I feel being and use the word I for it. But that does not mean that there is any separateness about it, because you also feel being and you also use the same word I for it, because it is the same being. Why should the quest be necessary? Why should a man not grow into his true natural state like a horse or an oak tree? Why should man alone of all creatures be tempted to misuse his faculties and have to curb his desires in order to grow to his true breadth and stature? This involves the question, what differentiates man from other creatures? Many creatures have many abilities greater than man in one direction or another. What distinguishes man is his self consciousness that he is not only a man but knows that he is a man. He is conscious to being a man. It sometimes happens that a person has an experience of a pure being. He just is and feels the fact of being. Also, he appreciates later that this is pure consciousness. Thoughts can be suspended, but even when they occur, they do not interrupt the flow of consciousness. But he feels sometimes no bliss about it. This occurs to him as a sort of grievance. He feels that something must be wrong either with the teaching or himself. The explanation is that it is the case of the mind eavesdropping. Who feels no bliss? I, but that I has no business to be there at all. He is a mortal spying on God. Being not only feels bliss but is bliss. Only the absence of the reporter I is a necessary condition for it. Even a life of disinterested activity is not enough to dissolve the ego sense. It is usually needs to be reinforced by a stronger and more forceful campaign. This can be either surrender or inquiry. Lord Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita enjoins surrender. Sage Vasishta in Yoga Vasishta enjoins self-inquiry. Sri Bhagavan said when he was asked, there are two ways, ask yourself, who am I? Or submit. The mind acts as though it is the ruler or owner of all the faculties. It has to abdicate and surrender them and itself to the pure being or self, or has to look inward to see what is true self or being. In the following Bhagavan's path of inquiry, Osborne combined with its true devotion and selfless service. Jnana went hand in hand with bhakti and nishkamya karma. He was very regular and attending the chanting of the Vedas in front of Sri Bhagavan's shrine, both in the mornings and in the evenings. He affirmed that listening to it helped in meditation. He was a towering example of an ascetic living a family life. Let's continue the next chapter. Thank you. Bye bye. Rama Rama Pupodu.